Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of Meepleville Meets. I have been so excited and waiting to talk to this next guest. He is such a lovely man, a really good friend. Haven't had the chance to speak to him for a while because he has gone from one side of the country all the way to the other. We're going to get into that. But I'd like to introduce you to the new U.S. Community Director for Mythic Games. Welcome, my dear friend, Sam Healey. Hello, Sam.
Hello. How you doing? Good to see you again.
Good to see you, too. It's been too long. Much
Hasn't
too
it?
long. Yeah. Yes, well, I see you got the long beard. You're growing that out.
Yeah, now, it's getting there.
Is it because you moved to the mountains and you're now a mountain man?
No, I'm not like Grizzly Adams. You know, I'm not any of that. But no, it's something that I've always, I've always liked longer beards.
Oh, okay.
And so I have the chance to. I've started it, and so I can't stop. So
there you go.
We're working on it. I'm ponytailing a little bit, and then maybe braiding after it gets longer. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
All right, sounds good. So I want to ask you about your current situation. So you drove all the way across country. I know you said you took the lower route, I believe, right?
I did.
And you moved to the west. So how are you liking the West Coast?
Well, it is definitely more expensive to live up here, but it is. I don't have any regrets. I'll put it that way. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to have kids. It's a great place to be able to go out and do stuff out in kind of the outdoors. We just went on yesterday. We went on a hike in this really cool place, and it's just a great opportunity to do stuff with your family but you're not stuck indoors, and that's not counterproductive to gaming. We still get that in as well, but there's a lot of other stuff to do too, so that's cool.
Right. And how because it's a dramatic shift in environment from being in a tropical palm trees, all that kind of stuff, out to now mountains and woods. And what are you liking about the different kind of climate?
Oh, this is as far as climate is concerned, this feels much more like home than almost any place I've ever lived. Now, I grew up in Texas and in San Antonio, and so I grew up with kind of a drier heat, but like having 30 days in a row where it hits 105 degrees, but it's low humidity, so it's not that big of a deal. When I was a kid, my dad was Air Force, so we moved around a lot. We spent a few years in Virginia. We spent a few years in Germany. And so I got to kind of love snow in those areas. Spent some years in Korea as well. It snows pretty regularly over there as well. So I like snow. I love mountains, and I just can't get enough of it. It's much better than flat, and it's much better than hurricane. So,
and Florida is extremely flat. It's the flattest country in the nation. People don't know that. It really is.
No, it's hard sometimes to roll downhill.
It is,
but it's I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I posted a picture of the temperature gauge in my car. That tells you how hot it is outside. It was 107. And I posted just that picture with just hashtag still better than Florida weather.
Yeah, there you go.
And I got comment after comment after comment after comment. No way, it's only 85 degrees here. And and then like a week later, you got 2 hurricanes headed your way.
There you go.
I'm good.
Yeah, me too. I had enough of that. I lived in South Florida myself for a while, for about 15 years, so I know it too. But are you, because you mentioned snow, and from what I understand from people who live up there in Washington, if you're east of the mountains, you do get snow. If you're west, you don't. So are you east of the mountains?
Yes. Yeah, we're on the eastern side. We're just on the eastern side, just over Stevens or Bullitt Pass, as you're coming over from Seattle. probably about a 3.5, maybe 4 hour drive if you're driving slow or something to that effect. So, but yeah, we don't get a whole ton of snow, but at least we didn't this last year, or the year before that, really. But we still get it, and it stays on the mountains for a long time, and it's picturesque, and it's really good. It's really cool.
Oh, nice. Okay, well, good. So part of this, Sam, what I really want to do is, again, I want people to get to know you, and I'd like to get to know more of you too, so we can just get to know more of Sam Healey, the person. And you did mention that you did travel around a lot because you were a military brat. I don't know if that's a derogatory term, but I know it's just a common term. Right?
We'll take it. We'll take it.
And your father, I believe you said it was the person. Okay, he was the one who was in the service, so in the Air Force. What was life like growing up as a military brat?
Wow. Well, early on, before I was even born, what had happened was, no, I'm just kidding. Before I was actually even born, my mom's doctors knew she was going to have complications, and she and my dad were currently stationed in Okinawa, which is an island just off of Japan, and the mainland. And so she had to be medevaced back to the States to Wilford Hall Medical Center in San Antonio so that she could have me and be safe, basically. And so from that point on, that was like one of the cool things about military life, is that they really do, more often than not. I know there's always going to be, exceptions to every story and two sides of the coin and all that, but they do try to take care of their people. They definitely did a very good job taking care of my mother. So much so that my mom's doctor, his last name is now my middle name, because that's how she thanked him for being such a good doctor for her through all of her complications and all of that kind of stuff. So that's a really cool thing about it. But on the other hand, you move around, generally speaking, you move around every 3 to 4 years. Okay. And so you are basically picking up and going to a brand new place, and you have to find new friends. You have to find new, niches. You have to find new, whatever. You're in a new school and so forth and so on. And so that was kind of the norm until my dad moved back from Germany, and we landed in Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi. And when we went there was no base housing available, so we had to find our own house off base. And we found a place in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, which is just about a 20-30 minute drive down I-10 from Biloxi. And so my freshman year of high school was spent at Ocean Springs High School, there in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. A year after that, base housing opened up. So then we moved to base, and I went to Biloxi High School. So freshman year was Ocean Springs. Biloxi, sophomore year was Biloxi High. A year after that, my dad decides to retire. And so we have to move again. So we moved to a place called Gautier, Mississippi, Gautier. How that spells Gautier, go for it. And my high school was Pascagoula. So that's 3 years, 3 schools. And then my dad moves to Mobile, Alabama for my 4th year. And so I spend my 4th year of high school at Murphy High School in Mobile, Alabama. So 4 years of high school, 4 different schools. And that pretty much sums up what it's like to be in a military brat.
Right. Yeah. Because I didn't have quite as severe. I mean, I went to a lot of schools because my parents were kind of moving up, getting education, going to different colleges, moving up different jobs. So we moved a lot as well. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, with the way you grew up and being in a military family, moving around a lot, do you have many old friends? Were you able to keep them and keep them with you through the years?
That a lot of that happened before the internet really got up and running, and before we had things like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, it's relatively easy to keep in contact with people now, right? Especially by comparison. I still have let's see. I would imagine I have less than 10 friends from all of those years that I still keep in contact with. And the ones that I have probably contacted this year are probably less than 5.
Okay.
Because it's just hard to keep track of. And really 3, well, actually 2, because one of them passed away. Two of those 5 are guys that I was in a band with in high school. You know, we had a little cover band and we spent all of our time together. So that was when I started in my sophomore year in high school, and then it carried over to a couple of the other ones, even though we changed schools. But yeah, my lead guitarist from the band, Brian Perkins, I still keep in contact with him. He's a firefighter in Houston.
Okay.
And the bass player, Brian, it was Brian Perkins. Brian, I'm going to kill myself. I can't remember his last name, but he was the bassist.
Does that mean you were the drummer?
No, I was rhythm guitar, lead vocals.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I was rhythm guitar, lead vocals. I was basically, my idol back then was James Hetfield from Metallica. So I did everything. I tried to find rings that looked like his, and I tried to cut my facial hair to match his, and I tried to mimic his stance and how he picked, and yeah, I was a dork, but you know, that's what you do.
That is true. So here's an interesting thing I'd like to know, maybe about the makeup of Sam Healey. And since you had the tremendous opportunity, maybe it wasn't. Some people look at it as a good thing. Some people look at it as a bad thing. I don't know. But moving around so a lot, living in different parts of the world, different culture, different society. Do you think that made you maybe appreciate America more? Or how was that in developing your thoughts about, say, being an American or what we have here in America by being able to live in different parts of the world?
You know, there's 2 sides to it, I guess you could say. One side of it, absolutely. It made me appreciate things here in America much more. It also showed me a few things that America could be doing better. For example, when we lived in Korea, we had healthcare that was sponsored by the government. We paid, I think it was I had a family of 5 at that point, and we paid, I think, $30 a month for healthcare for all of us. And whenever we went to the doctor, it was like $3 or $4 for the visit. So the healthcare in Korea is like much better now than what you're paying here. I'll put it that way. You can talk about the level of care and the quality of care and all of that kind of stuff, but that aspect kind of showed to me, since we were it was early in my adult life, but it was after I'd grown up and I was kind of savvy to how expensive all of that kind of stuff is. And that kind of opened my eyes to think, this can be done differently. I'll put it that way. So that's kind of one aspect where it showed me how things could probably be done better. But one of the things that I really liked about growing up as a military kid is the fact that I'm a third culture kid. And if you don't know what a third culture kid is, basically it's somebody who is born in a certain culture and then grows up in another culture, which produces a third culture that combines both of the others. And that's probably not a completely accurate definition, but it kind of gives you the idea. I was an American, and that presents its own culture. I was also a military kid, which presents another culture, and now I'm living in a foreign country, which is another culture. So that has kind of given me a different kind of mindset than a lot of other people do who maybe grew up in one place their entire life.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the other things, it's very interesting that you brought that up. So it's good that, you have that perspective, right? And it's something that I think more people, it would benefit a lot more people to have these kind of experiences growing up. But I'd like to talk about what you brought up about the military culture. And what I'd like to know, whether you went to Germany or Korea, were you able, because a lot of times with the military, you're sort of insular still, right? Whether you live on base or near the base, you still have a lot of, say, military associations, military friends. Were you able to sort of get out of that and get into, quote unquote, the real culture of those places?
Yes. Okay. Matter of fact, the kind of the same thing. When we first moved to Germany, there wasn't any base housing, so we had to get a home off base. Well, my dad at the time, whether he had to, like it was the only place he could find, or if he chose to, we actually lived about 15 kilometers away from the base proper, in a town called Kielburg. Now, the distance might be wrong, but we lived a good bit away from where the base was. So we still did our shopping on base and got our groceries and all that kind of stuff, and clothing and all that kind of thing. For the most part, we bought some of that stuff, because there was a shop right down the road from our house. But we lived off base for a year, and we were completely, 90% immersed in the culture at that point, which is really cool because you have to interact with people that are citizens of the host country, and that provides a different thing. Another cool thing that we were able to do. My dad is a big history buff, and so he's also big on hereditary lines and all of that kind of stuff. And so he's done a lot of delving into that kind of thing. And after we moved away from Germany, he did a lot of work on just different pictures that he found throughout his internet searches. And he found 2 pictures that were taken on the road that we used to live on in Kielburg. The one was an armored division of American troops coming through and moving the front line over. The other one is that road, and there's a Nazi party propaganda parade being held right in front of our house. And that kind of stuff blows me away. You just kind of sit there and look at the picture and you're like, that window right there, that was my room. And it just blows your mind, it just blows your mind. But yeah, it definitely gives you a different outlook because it opens your mind to the idea that, hey, you're not the only culture that matters. Other people's culture matters. And it's hard to explain because people who have never experienced it, it's like explaining, what yellow tastes like. You just can't do it,
It's very true. And again, that's, when people say like Europeans are more cosmopolitan or whatever, part of that essence is because it's sort of like the States in America, because they do have these sort of very distinct languages, very distinct cultures, foods, all within close distance. They travel around, good experience in them all. So they are a little more worldly because of their environment. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you were to pick one, I'm going to limit you to one.
Oh, here you go.
Here we go.
There you go.
So I guess Korea and Germany. What is something really uniquely culturally Korean and really uniquely culturally German that really like is deep in your soul, part of Sam, that you just really appreciated of those two?
Wow. Gee whiz. You just hit me with the big guns right off the bat, brother.
Come on, Sam.
That's keep me on my toes, man.
No, that's not what these are about. I'm asking stuff.
All right. Something that is, wow, see, I don't know that I would have anything that is inherently German that would be something that's really kind of a part of me, because it's not really, I don't know that it's kind of like the Borg, you assimilate people, but you also take in what they were. Their stuff becomes part of the collective, so to speak. It doesn't take its own singularity, So that's kind of where I am. I think there's a few things. One of the things I guess that I really pulled away from with Germany is a love for Four Seasons. Because really before that, I had basically lived in Texas for the most part, with a couple of years spent in Virginia. But the bulk, so Texan culture was all I really kind of ever knew, as well as the weather. But with Germany, it brought in that love that I still have, and that's really kind of why I'm harping on this. Is I still really have that. I have the love for that geographical setting, not geographical. The outdoors, put it that way. I have that, but I also really enjoy that kind of weather. Just makes me feel at home, and that's the first place that I really kind of grabbed onto that. So as far as Korea is concerned, one of the things that really kind of, I don't know that I took it in, it's made me more aware of it, I guess you could say, is the fact that there is a lot of your personal bubble is much smaller in Korea. I'll put it that way. And that opened my eyes to the fact that I have a personal bubble, and I would like people not to encroach upon it. And so,
yes.
So that I understand, when I'm walking around in a convention, I'm always kind of looking over my shoulder, looking behind me, not because I'm paranoid that people are following me. I'm like, am I, if I stop right now, am I going to make somebody run into me, or am I going to make somebody drop something, that kind of stuff. I'm always kind of aware of my surroundings. And that's something that Korea really did. When you get onto a subway in Korea, in Seoul,
oh yeah,
you're going to touch somebody.
Yes,
and whether you want to or not, there ain't nothing you can do about it. So I'm always kind of aware of that. So that's a little piece, I guess, I took away.
Okay, and then you said part of the time you were over there was, so you're an adult, right? You lived over there as an adult.
Yeah.
You said you had your own family, and there were 5 people in your family. I don't know whether you said 5 people or 5 kids.
5 people. Yeah, there's
5 people total.
Yeah, well, we went over there with just my 2 boys, myself, and my at that point wife.
Okay.
Then we had our third child, my daughter, while we were in Korea. And then our 4th was born about a year and a half after we left Korea. So, when we were over there, we had four people to begin with, but then we grew to 5 while we were there. So, yeah.
So, do you think, because you lived your life as a military brat and were able to go to these different countries and all this kind of stuff, and some of your kids were able to experience that different culture, and I guess maybe some weren't, do you feel that they're going to be missing out a lot? Or, you know what I mean? Like, compared to your life, do you think that they'll grow up differently, maybe not learning or being able to experience the things you do and have maybe a certain mindset from living in these different cultures like you were able to?
Sure. That was one of the reasons. That was part of the reasons why that I wanted to move to Korea.
To Korea.
Yeah, that was part of the reason why I wanted to, was to give them that glimpse, that peek behind the curtain, so to speak, so that they didn't grow up, kind of with tunnel vision.
Right.
That's one of the reasons I wanted to move over there. And with that having been said, I don't. Yeah, it was hard, but I don't think that it is one of those things that I look back as a bad thing. With moving around in the military, I look back and I'm like, while I was going through it, yeah, it was like, oh, I got to move again. I got to find more friends. I got to do this. I got to do that. But looking back on it now, I'm like, man, I got to go to Paris. I got to go see the Eiffel Tower.
Right.
I got to go and I've been skiing one time. Guess where I went skiing?
In the Alps.
The Alps, baby. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't duplicate that, you know?
That's right. Absolutely.
So it's that kind of stuff. And when we were over in Korea, we tried to, we were busy, but we tried to move around, and do stuff as much as we can in the culture. And it was much more in the culture than I ever was on an American base, an Air Force base. So they got more of that. Then there was a time where my kids could speak 3 languages. They could speak English, they could speak Korean, and they could speak Chinese because they were learning it. And they weren't fluent in it, of course, because they were just, kindergarten age, but they were speaking 3 languages at one point. And, when I was that age, I was like having trouble
I know, right?
speaking in 1, let alone 3.
No, that's fantastic. So yeah, I mean, that is really good that your kids had to have that experience. However, they didn't have to sort of at one point in their growing up come to a fork in the road. And what I mean by that is, as far as you perhaps maybe pursuing a military career. So growing up in a military family, and your father was in the military, were you either ever pressured, or did you ever think about that? So why or why not did you pursue or not pursue a military career?
I actually, unfortunately, I did try, but I was it was back when the government was just starting to make a whole truckload of financial cutbacks for the military. And so the military, when I was in high school, or when I was about to be done with high school, was able to be much more stringent on who they recruited. And so if you were not underneath a certain weight, they said no. They gave you a piece of paper that had basically a crackers and water diet on it, and said, when you're underweight, come back and see us, and we'll see what we can happen. So I went to the Air Force, I went to the Army, and I went to the Marine Corps, and all 3 of them said the same thing. I've had a lot of Navy guys say, "Yeah, you should have went to the Navy. They don't take anybody." But I didn't go to the Navy because I didn't want to be on a boat. I wanted to be in one of the other 3 branches, and they didn't take me, so I had to find something else to do, because I'm not a crackers and water kind of guy. I'm sorry.
There you go.
I like food. So, but that kind of led me down a different path, and so that's where it is. My second oldest is actually in the Army right now, so he's
very good.
Yeah, he's airborne artillery, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So he's
nice.
He's carrying it on.
82nd Airborne down there in Fort Bragg.
Yes, he is.
Yeah,
that's correct.
So then, if you weren't able to go in the military, I'd like to find out what you did go into, and did whatever you did end up going into, or whatever was it something you pursued, or was it something that sort of, kind of just became the best option? So how did that, what happened after high school?
Okay, well, after high school, a little bit, we got to go back a little bit. My mom died when I was 10, my birth mother. And because of some turmoil in the family, at that point, I kind of got not really separated from them, but there was a disconnect there with my mom's side of the family, and so I lost contact with them over the next few years. And so after that happened, we just lost contact. We lost contact, and so when I graduated from high school, I decided to move back to Texas and kind of reconnect with them. Part of that was probably, if I'm understanding and remembering correctly, part of that was I got to get out of my parents' house, that type of thing. But part of it was definitely I want to see my family. I grew up, and my mom was was sick a lot and in and out of hospitals. So I spent a lot of time with my extended family because my dad was in the military. He had to work, so he couldn't really do anything about needing to kind of lean on my mom's side of the family there in Texas. And so I spent a lot of time with them. And so they were just as much a part of my growing up as my mom and dad were. And so I wanted to get some of that back. So I moved back to Texas, lived with them, started going to college. I was, at first I wanted to pursue a Bible degree at Texas Bible College. It was a very small, it only had like 60 students or something like that. It's a very small college run by a church there. It was in San Antonio. Went there for a couple of years, and then they had to shut their doors because they couldn't financially continue. So at that point, I went to University of Texas San Antonio as an English major, and I also tried to take some music composition courses because I was still playing my guitar pretty much regularly and trying to pursue that. And it took one course of that for me to realize that wasn't going to happen. I was sitting in a intro to music. What was it? Intro to music theory or something to that effect. And this guy is talking about the space-time continuum. And I'm like, I thought this was about music, man. What's this science fiction class, you know? And so anyway, that was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. But I still continued taking college courses just because I was that age. I needed to do that. So one summer I'm playing softball for my church, and I'm rounding third base. Actually, I'm rounding second base, and the throw's about to come in, and I'm like, I got to make this. We were down a couple runs. I had to make this. Slid into the bag, caught my foot on the bag, and broke my tibia about 3 centimeters above my ankle. I'm still a bigger guy. I'm not as big as I am now, but I was still a bigger guy, and that's the small bone in the back of your leg, and it's kind of necessary for walking. So I'm laid up. I'm laid up for a couple months at least. And so my dad says, you need to move back. We'll get you resituated and all this other kind of stuff. We finally decided that I go down to Pensacola Christian College to pursue a degree in Bible with a youth ministry specialization and a minor in speech. And so that's the course that I was pursuing, and that was the youth ministry, working with teenagers to try to help them navigate the rough waters of life.
Oh, okay. Very good. Real quick, Sam, I was just wondering, on the, what would that be? Right side of your face, I think there's some stripes from a blind. Yes. Can you close those blinds a little bit or something? Because of this, with the stripe. Yes. With the
Is that better?
Yeah.
I'll just sit here like this.
Yeah, there.
Yeah, I'll move it. Hold on.
Okay.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Yes, so we can see a little bit more. Don't have the stripes all across your face.
Yeah.
So then you wanted to be in youth ministry and help youth and all that kind of stuff. So then I want to know, which is kind of good, because so now you're done with college and you have a degree, I take it?
Yes. Well,
okay.
I am now, yes.
Definitely. But back then, so I'm wondering, what did you do then? What was your work? And then how did you end up in Korea?
Well, Tom Vasel and his wife, her dad, so Tom's father-in-law, ran an English language institute in Korea, which is where Korean nationals will come and learn how to speak English from kindergarten on up to 12th grade. That's the kids that we catered to. He also ran a small foreign school on the same campus, but it was mainly a English language institute that was run in Gunsan, South Korea. And Tom and his wife went over about a year before we did. And when I was about to graduate in December of 2001, he began talking to me the summer previous about coming over because they needed teachers. They were down, their schedules were heavy, and they needed to have a little bit more. They needed to have a little bit more freedom, flexibility in their schedule. So they needed more teachers. And so we talked about it, and we thought about it, and we ultimately decided to move over there when I graduated in December. So January 2002, we landed in Korea to be English. I was to be a English as a second language teacher for K all the way up through 12th grade.
Okay.
I did that for 2 years, and the connection was I was still working with kids. I was still working. So I had a youth degree major, but a teen ministry, and so that was the connection. I'm working with kids. I'm in that kind of environment, and so we're working with missionaries that are over there. That's what they were, and so there is more than that. I'm sorry. Sorry. There's more than that that's going on. So then after a couple of years that we moved to Seoul, well, actually just north of Seoul in a town called Uijeongbu. If you know the TV show MASH,
yes,
the 407th, that was in Uijeongbu.
Oh, okay.
And the 407th is still in Uijeongbu.
Oh, really?
at least when I was there, yeah. And so that's a pretty cool connection. But anyway, that's the town that we lived in, and I started teaching not just English as a second language. I wasn't doing that anymore. I was doing basic computer skills as well as speech and debate. And then I was also the soccer coach on top of that. And then I was also working with the youth group at the church. So that's kind of what I did. And then that's pretty much what I stayed in. When we left Korea, I spent a year as an assistant pastor in Martinez, California. And then after that, we moved down to Homestead, Florida, where I was the senior high youth pastor, and I was the Bible teacher in the school that was a ministry of the church. So that's pretty much the jobs that I've had since then. After about 6 or 6.5 years in that position, I decided to go full time with the Dice Tower, and then I was still the youth pastor of the church, though I just wasn't a teacher anymore.
Okay, so it's interesting because I sort of knew that you knew Tom in Korea, or you had a relationship, back then. I don't know if a lot of viewers know it, and I don't even know like the full extent of it. So so tell us like how you guys met, because it's obviously at least 20 years that you've known each other. So how did you first meet Tom?
I first met Tom at college. We were both summer workers, where after the semesters are over, everybody goes home except for people who actually need to work for their degree. We had to work to help pay for it, is what I mean. And so we stayed around on campus, and they kind of consolidated all of the summer workers into one of the dorms that was there, possibly two, depending on how many they needed and what dorms they used and so forth. So at that point, we would be able to, the summer workers just kind of got a bond that everybody else just didn't have. You still had your friends that would come back during the semester, but summer workers, we were like, you had that connection, and that's what we were. We were on the same hall. And Tom had the computer on the hall, and he had the best computer on the hall that could play Dark Forces. The first Star Wars game that he could play. His computer could run X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. That type of stuff. And so that's how we kind of connected. But then I had the car, so I could take people off campus. And so it was a mutually beneficial relationship to start off with. So that's how we met in college, and it just kind of grew from there. It's really strange, but his and his wife's anniversary is my birthday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that's a pretty interesting thing. I don't know why they chose my birthday. That's my day.
Right.
But
And they wanted to share it with you. So
I'll share it, I guess. That's fine.
But that's kind of so. Actually, going back to a question I asked a while ago, then Tom actually would be one of those people who have probably been around in your life the longest, then, as far as a friend goes, right?
Yes, and yeah, that came after I was already out of the military life, but because I was at college and not living with my dad anymore. My dad had already retired at that point as well. So, but that's why I didn't make that connection. But yeah, his is probably one of the longest friendships that I've had in my life. Yes.
Okay, so now that I know the full story of how you guys met, how you got together, and all that kind of stuff, and then you were in Korea together, got all that kind of stuff. So how did you both come together in Homestead? Was it you, him? How did that happen?
That was simply fate. That was not of our orchestration at all. When I moved back to California, the church that I went to work for had saved up enough money to pay a salary for an assistant pastor for a year. And they were hoping, the vision was during that year, we would have enough families come into to be added to the fold, so to speak, and we would be able to continue to afford that. Well, it didn't happen that way. And so around 7, maybe 8 months into that year, the pastor told me, we're not going to be able to afford to keep you on. So, you're going to need to find a new job. So I did. I started putting in resumes left and right. At one point, I was probably putting in about 50 to 60 resumes a week at different places trying to find a job. And that's multiple weeks in a row. So it's not like, but it was really hard. I got, out of all that, I got a total of 2 callbacks. One was for TSA and the other one was for the school and church combo in Homestead. And I started talking to them and interviewing with them. And about 3/4 of the way through the interview process, they had already kind of decided that they were going to hire me, and I had already decided that I would accept. But they said, "Hey, do you know this guy named Tom Vasel?" And so I was like, "Yeah." Went to college with him, served with him in Korea, all this kind of stuff. And so, yeah, we're hiring him for our math teacher position. I was like, "Cool." That's
so weird.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's absolutely weird.
It's funny, Sam, because I'm one of those kind of people. I really believe like in energy, like sort of like things come together and all that kind of stuff. And when you like, how the heck does that happen? Right?
It just does, man. You can't write this, right? You can't.
How does that happen? I mean,
you can't make this stuff up, right? That's a saying that goes, right?
Yeah, can't make this stuff up. Okay, good. So I'm glad. Okay, that is just that's cool. That's just a cool story. How just serendipity, just whatever energy just brought you together. So, okay, you're working together in the church and all this kind of stuff. And I guess he goes and does the Dice Tower or starts doing his reviews, his own kind of thing. Yes. How? What was your relationship like in the church? Were you playing games? So how was that relationship like, playing games aside? And then how did he bring you in to the fold of the Dice Tower?
Well, that actually starts while we were still in Korea. Because when he was in Korea, when we were in Korea, he started writing written reviews for Board Game Geek. And then he was like, why don't I just do video reviews? There's only, at that point, there was like only a few people doing it. I'm remembering Scott Nicholson was doing them. I think Drakenstrike, Jeremy from Man vs. Meeple, he was doing them. And Tom was doing them. And, I don't remember anybody else that was doing video reviews at that point other than those 3 guys. And Tom had just started. They all kind of started at almost the same time. But everybody was doing written reviews. And so he started doing video reviews, and then he and Joe started well, I think he and Joe started the Dice Tower before he started doing video reviews. I could be wrong. I could have that mixed up, but I'm pretty sure that's how it went. He and Joe started doing the Dice Tower in the back of our church auditorium, using the church's audio equipment and microphones and all this other kind of stuff, and the computer that's back there. And so, that was fine. I played games with them. They were my buddies. We went and played games and stuff like that. And that was my involvement. I enjoyed the games and I enjoyed the camaraderie. When Joe left Korea, though, Tom was looking for somebody to fill that spot, and I was there. So I just kind of, there were a few episodes of the Dice Tower where it was all three of us together. But after Joe left, it was just me and Tom. And I was there for about a year. Maybe it was more than a year. It was about 100 episodes, I think, that I was the co-host of the Dice Tower after Joe left. And then I decided to leave after that, and that's when Eric came on when I left Korea. So that's when it actually started. Now, when we got to Florida, that's when we started doing the top tens with me and him, and then we met Z around the same time, and we asked him. He had a very neat personality, and we got along with him really well, and so Tom asked him to do that as well with us. So that's kind of how it all kind of folded. Right before I stopped teaching, he asked Z to come on board. As a matter of fact, I believe about 6 months before, at the beginning of that year, he asked Z to come on board. And then when I finished teaching, I came on board as well. And that's how that kind of came together, I guess.
Okay. And then the total length of time before you left the East Coast to go to the West Coast for Mythic Games, what was the total length of time then you were with? You were essentially sort of like a full-time employee now of the Dice Tower. How long would that have been?
That would have been about, I want to say about 3.5 to 4 years. I want to say that's the time frame. I'm horrible with dates unless it's written down.
That's all, because it seems so much longer.
Well, because it kind of was, because when we were in Korea, I was the co-host.
Oh, I see. Right.
But back then, it wasn't a full-time job for either of us. It was just a couple dudes sitting in Tom's. At one point sitting in the back of our auditorium at church, but then it switched over to Tom's living room, or one of the rooms in his home there in Korea. So it started back then. That's why it seems longer than it really was, because we started in Korea probably around the year, and again, I don't remember, but it was just doing quick math. I got over there in 2002, and it was probably a good 4 years into it. So that's probably around 2006.
Okay.
That I started doing the Dice Tower with him, the podcast. And then when we got over to Homestead together, that was 2010. And I was still doing top tens with him. I wasn't an employee though, and he hadn't even started the business yet. But after about 3 years, he started the business and left the school, left teaching. And a couple years later, Z and I joined him in that.
Okay, very good. So I'm glad. It seems like we've had a good flow, because and I got to learn a lot, which was really, really cool. But I do want to just ask one question,
Sure.
Because it seems to come up a lot, as far as, because you are I don't know how to say it. I don't want to say like heavily into Christianity. I mean, you're a Christian, but it's been a big part of your life.
Yes.
Then I want to talk about the Dungeons and Dragons thing. And I know people like you and Tom, and there's a lot of Christians who just play Dungeons and Dragons. But I've had people like in Meepleville. I had this one family. It just shocked me, where I was like, "Oh, we do this, we do that. Oh, and we have Dungeons and Dragons." And her response was, she said, "Oh, we're Christians. We don't do that." So I know. So here's my question for you, Sam. And I know you can't essentially speak for other people, and I'm not asking you to speak for other people, but I would like to know, because I'm sure perhaps in the church people may have talked to you or approached you. If you could just maybe help me and maybe others understand why there is that sort of, because you're a Christian, you don't do D&D. Just
Sure.
to help us. Okay.
Well, first thing that needs to be said is that, in my opinion, Christianity is it's a personal relationship with my Creator, my Lord Christ. It is not a religion. Oh, sorry, dropped my ring. It's not a religion. Religion, in my opinion, is a construct of man that has been placed over what the Bible calls for, and the Bible calls for a relationship with my God. It doesn't call for religion. So from that, Christianity is very much an individual's walk. It is not necessarily a list of do's and don'ts. Are there things that we should probably stay away from? Yes. Are there things that we should probably gravitate towards? Yes. But that isn't it. That's not all it is. So from after having said that, why do people have that affinity, or why do people have that aversion to Dungeons and Dragons? Well, to me, Dungeons and Dragons isn't any different than any other game. It's, you have a set of rules, you have a playing service, you use your imagination, and you go on. What a lot of people have done in the past, in my life, because there was a time where I would have been that lady saying, "Oh, no, I don't get into that." But where that comes from is that there's this the Bible's pretty clear on a number of different things. One of them is staying away from witchcraft and sorcery and all of that kind of stuff. And so, okay, fine. But in my opinion, Dungeons and Dragons isn't witchcraft. It isn't sorcery. It's a game where you roll dice and you make decisions based upon your imagination, and you roll dice to see if what you want to do actually works. Sure, there's magic users and stuff like that, but it's a far cry, in my opinion, from the actual, I guess you could say, activity of any of that other stuff. So, in my opinion, is there anything wrong with playing D&D? And the answer is no, because it's just like any other game.
Right.
But can you take it too far? And I think that's where Dungeons and Dragons gets a lot of its negative stigma from, is that people in the past have simply taken it too far. Kind of like when somebody takes drinking beer too far, they become an alcoholic. And when they take, you do these things and it becomes negative. It's not that the thing inherently is negative. It's that you've turned it into something negative because you do it too much.
Right. But inherently also, Sam, because I think because I'm 50, almost 57. So back in the 70s and 80s, I know that there was, I don't know, maybe a couple kids playing and one of them killed, may have actually done it, but that tainted the whole thing. Just like when Ozzy Osbourne, ate a dove or something, all of a sudden all metal.
It was a bat. He bit the head off a bat and he peed on the Alamo, and that's why I don't like Ozzy.
Oh, wait! Hold on, Sam. It really was a dove. I think he did it in a radio a record executive's office.
It may have been both. He definitely did a bat. I know that for a fact, but it may have also been a dove.
Right? But those incidences sort of tainted the whole thing, like all heavy metal or whatever. Sure. Animals there, and the same thing with this one incident with the D&D. So that may have just tainted the whole thing.
Sure.
But I would just like to ask, and thank you very much for explaining about your personal relationship with God and how how you feel and all that kind of stuff. But generally, overall, because that is a big part of your life, working in church, being around church-going people, all this kind of stuff. What would you say, the general outlook or feeling towards Dungeons and Dragons, or that, say, genre of games? Is it more positive, or is it still sort of heavily negative?
It's still heavily negative. And
really,
Yeah, part of that is the artwork and the design. Whether you go with the tropes of, a scantily clad barbarian female, or you've got this very demonic looking person who is, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of that. The artwork that's associated, they will point at the picture and say, "See, that's not good." And of course, there's a lot of problems with that kind of ideology, in my opinion. But you really shouldn't. On some level, we're brought up to, you don't judge a book by its cover, right?
Yep.
But that kind of gets thrown out of the window when you find something that you can really kind of latch onto, and that's not okay. That's hypocritical. So there has to be a middle ground somewhere. There has to be, if we spend our lives taking long walks off of short piers all the time,
Mm-hmm.
well, we're going to stay pretty wet, and that's not a cool thing, So you got to kind of. One of the things, I'm this is not a shameless plug, but I also do a Dice People podcast that I do with Kos Ishmael. We used to do it with Dan King, but we had to switch it up a little bit. And we've done a lot of podcasts when it was with Dan King. We've done podcasts with a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life, and not all of them were on board with Christianity. As a matter of fact, many of them were not. They were the antithesis, And when we did those podcasts, one of probably the most disappointing things for me was the flack that we took from other Christians that were telling us that we had done something wrong by not cornering these people while we had them on our podcast, and kind of witness to them or anything like that. And that was just not our vision for that. Our vision was that we need to start opening up the avenues of communication that have been shut down by hypocrisy, by political bent, by whatever you might put in there as the reasoning why that avenue of dialogue had been shut down. We want to try to do away with some of those divisions and get people talking again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, at the end of the day, I feel the same way. So you can either be a Christian or an atheist. You can be gay or not gay. You can be, what was the other thing I could see? Oh, a Republican or a Democrat. Whatever you are, that doesn't define you, right? No. We all have multitude of things that we may identify with, that we relate to, that we say we are, whatever. But yet, one thing shouldn't define you, and you shouldn't have to. Your whole life outlook shouldn't be dictated by one thing, because we are all made up of a lot of different things.
And this is one of the reasons why I'm super good with the title Air Force Brat, because to me the title Air Force Brat has so much more than just one thing in it. It's so much more. There's so much that can be packed into that, and you can't tell what all that other stuff is by just that label. And that's one of the things I like about it. It really points you to, okay, this person is categorically different than anybody else that might even come close to looking like him, because he grew up in a different environment.
That's right. And it does, and it's sort of a badge, right? Because it's nice that we all are able to put these different badges on us, and you have that Air Force Brat badge, and another person who does. Now you all of a sudden have this connection with that other person that other people don't, because you both know exactly what that means, because you share that same experience. So Sam, we're real close to coming to our time, and thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
I appreciate you asking.
I've learned so much about you and who you are, and all that. And I would be remiss, and I don't want to, that because there's so much more I'd like to talk to you about, but I don't want to go on all night. I do want to let the viewers know, and I do want you also to just tell us what you are now and where your life or what your life is in Washington as the United States Community Director for Mythic Games. So what is your title? What do you do? And Tell us a little bit about Mythic Games.
Okay, well, the title is a lot more highfalutin than it actually is. We basically what I'm doing is right now we're having online conventions because of COVID and all this other kind of stuff. So I'm the one that's scheduling all of our demos for all of those conventions. I'm the one that's scheduling all of those events and kind of in the background, kind of making sure everybody's where they're supposed to be. I'm also, Board Game Geek. Unfortunately, I just had a less than stellar interaction with somebody on YouTube with one of our videos. And that's unfortunate, but I probably should have worded what I said differently, but hindsight is 2020. So I apologize if you know who I'm talking to. But I'm doing comments on our YouTube videos. I'm doing answering stuff on our BGG product pages. All of our Kickstarter pages, that's something that I do every day. I try to check all of our active Kickstarters that we're still receiving comments on and stuff like that, answering those questions. I do a newscast video every week for the company where we kind of put everything into one. Usually we try to get it to around 10-minute video so that we can provide an update for all of our active projects. I'm also a demoer for the company, so I'm one of the ones that's demoing games at conventions. I'm also part of I'm basically part of the marketing team, but I also get to provide input for some development for the games that we have going on, play testing, and that kind of thing as well. Writing scripts for videos that we're making. I just wrote a script for a Reichbusters How to Play video that we're putting on. It's going to be a digitally animated video, not just where it's somebody in front of a table, physical copy. So that kind of stuff is what I'm doing as well. We just had a pretty good discussion about some frequently asked questions page for one of our games with our customer service head. So I spent about 30, 40, 45 minutes talking about that kind of stuff today. This morning, we had a call that lasted for about an hour and a half, talking about how we're going to move forward with our Darkest Dungeon campaign that's coming up later on in a couple months. After that, I got to spend another hour and a half talking about specifics about changes that we're about to do with newscasts and What's Up Wednesday updates, how I'm going to be taking over writing the scripts for those. And so it's much different than what I was doing at the Dice Tower, but it's very fun, and it keeps me on my toes.
So one last question, Sam, sort of to wrap this all up.
Okay.
I think I kind of know the answer, but I'd like to hear it from you. I don't know. So you are a very worldly person. You've had a lot of experiences, different things, different parts of the world, cultures, all this kind of stuff. You went all the way from the East Coast. You moved to the West Coast. Mythic Games seems to have the type of games that are exactly Sam Healey type games. Like, you know what I mean? So the question is, how is Sam at this moment? Do you feel that where you are, your position, whatever, are you one of those kind of people that feel you are where you should be, and are you happy? And just let us know, how is Sam Healey doing right at this moment?
Yes, that's the general question. Yes, I do feel like that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be right now, and part of that is definitely the company that I'm working for. Everybody at Mythic, I have a very high level of respect for. They're genuine people. They are honest people, and I'm not saying that anybody anywhere else isn't. I'm just saying that that's one of the characteristics that I know that they have. I also like the mindset. Nobody has, nobody thinks of themselves too highly, where, they're not willing to do something to help somebody else out in a different department, even though that's not their job, that type of thing. Everybody works together, and they work together very hard to do the best we can. And that's one of the things that I really like about Mythic. But even more than that, I'm exactly where I need to be, because, I liked working for the Dice Tower. Don't get me wrong at all. I loved being there with Z and Roy and Mike and Tom and Tom would have his daughters come in and it was good joking around with them as well. And being down there with Jason, I loved that job, loved the church I was working at, but being here with my kids, there's no other place that I would rather be. So that's just the way it is. And often I was just talking to Kaz the other day, and I was like, if I could do it all over again after the fact, that I wouldn't change a thing, even though it meant a pretty huge upheaval. Hashtag worth it. That's just the way it is. So yes, quick answer is yes. I'm right where I'm supposed to be, and I'm pretty confident in that respect.
Wow, very good. I knew that would be your answer because I know that's the kind of person you are, that you just take life how it is and you make the best out of everything, and you're just appreciative of life in general. And it's always going to lead you in the right direction, and you will end up where you should be at the end of the day, right?
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks, Sam. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know you have a house full of kids, so I know your time is precious, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Go away, and I will be right back with you.
Okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen, there we go for another episode of Meepleville Meets. We were so happy, so fortunate to have Sam Healey from Mythic Games. And let me tell you, I really learned quite a bit. It was very eye-opening to learn about his history and all that kind of stuff. So I hope you enjoy it too. And again, thank you for joining us for another episode of Meepleville Meets. We'll see you again in the future. Take care.